All right, let's finish up our part two of our energy flow notes. The last time we talked about the difference in producers, consumers, decomposers, and we said that the ultimate source of energy for all organisms on the earth comes from the sun. And we talked about how we're all connected. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the ways that we can track energy flow throughout different ecosystems. So you can do this on docs or you can do this on your own paper. Um, there may be some drawing. You may want to draw some things, so I would recommend writing that, but it's up to you. So first of all, we have an energy pyramid. So write this down. Energy pyramids model how energy is transferred between organisms from the ground up. So, as you move up, less energy is available and smaller amount of organisms exist. So, it's just like a pyramid, it's just a triangle. And then at the bottom, that's the biggest section. If you've ever seen the food pyramid, it looks exactly the same as far as, the shape. So, at the bottom, that's the biggest section. That means we have the most amount of energy there. That means that that's the most populous number, the most populous organism, too. So we would usually have producers there. So producers get 100% of energy because they get their energy directly from the sun. So they don't have to waste any energy going and finding the sun or anything like that. All that happens is the sun hits them, crazy stuff happens, and photosynthesis, boom, there is food. So they have 100% energy. And there's also a whole lot of producers on Earth. Think about just blades of grass. There's a lot. So they're at the bottom. That's the biggest number of organisms, and that's where the most energy is found. 100%, we'll say. So the producer is the lowest. It has 100% energy because that comes straight from the sun, and no energy is used to find food. That's really important. Think about producers. We said in the last set of notes that they just sort of say, "Oh, I'm hungry. All right, I've made some sugar. I'm good." They don't have to go out and search for food. So they don't have to expend any energy, even getting up and walking to the kitchen and saying, "Hey, mom, make me a sandwich." They're just there. They get their energy straight from the sun. The primary consumer that eats the producer, so it's the next level up on energy pyramid, and they get 10% of the energy from the producer. So 10% of 100 is 10. So they have 10% energy. The primary consumer, the reason it gets less energy is because it searches for food and then it eats. That takes a lot of energy. If you think about how energy is used, and we'll talk about that this year and next year a lot, anything that you do requires energy. So if you eat, you're using a lot of energy. The secondary consumer, that would be above the primary consumer. So we're moving up the pyramid, we're getting smaller, closer to the point. They eat the primary consumer and they get 10% of the 10% that the primary consumer have. So the secondary consumer has 1% energy whenever it eats. And that's because it has to hunt. Think about this too. The primary consumer, let's say it is a rabbit. The primary consumer is going to find the producer to eat. If there's a rabbit and it's out here in a field, it has its choice of which grass blade to eat. There's grass everywhere. The secondary consumer, let's say it is, I don't know, a snake. The snake is going to come eat the rabbit. Crazy stuff. But the snake has to find that rabbit. So, okay, it's searching around. There's less rabbits than there are blades of grass, I think you'd agree, in a field. So the snake sees the rabbit. Okay, there it is. And then it goes after the rabbit. When the rabbit realizes it's being hunted, if it's smart, it's going to run, right? So if the rabbit runs and the snake is really hungry, it's going to chase after that rabbit. So it has to use energy to hunt because what it's going to eat moves if it's got sense. Then it uses energy to eat, so there's a lot less energy there. So here's a picture of an energy pyramid. Um, this is the energy. So we have producers. As we move up, we call them primary consumers, herbivores, whatever you want to call it, the thing that eats the producer. Then we move up, we have carnivores, which eat the herbivores, a secondary consumer, which eats the primary consumer. And then at the main top of the pyramid, however many levels there may be, we have the top predator or the apex predator. And that pretty much just means it's very highly unlikely that there's going to be something hunting that animal because it's so crazy. high up on the pyramid. And we'll see here the sun is giving the energy here straight to the producers. But remember, we get energy from the sun. The herbivores, the carnivores, the top predator gets energy from the sun by eating other things. So, like the herbivores eat the producers, which gets energy from the sun. The carnivores eat the herbivores, which ate the producers, which got energy from the sun. The top predator eats the carnivores, which ate the herbivores, which ate the producers, which got energy from the sun. So, here's another example. This actually has like animals in it. This makes more sense to me. So I can see that, okay, there's phytoplankton. There's a lot of them. They have a lot of energy. Crustaceans eat the phytoplankton. They get less energy. There's less of them. The herring eat the crustaceans. There's less of them than there are here. They get less energy. The mackerel eat the herring. There's less of mackerel than there are herring. And the shark will eat the mackerel. So there's less sharks than there are mackerels. And here's another really complicated looking energy pyramid, but it's not that complicated. It's actually more detailed. So at the bottom, we have the producers. They have all the energy. When primary consumers eat them, they get 10% of that. Then secondary consumers get 10% of that. Third level consumers get 10% of that. Apex predators get 10% of that. And it goes on for however long it goes. And then it just points out here that there's decomposers that break down anything that dies. They don't care. They'll break down anything. And then they send those, this says it recycles nutrients back to the bottom. So that way things like nitrogen can get back into the atmosphere, like we talked about. And it also points out here that there's energy lost as heat, which we talked about. Like if you're hunting, you're doing anything, you're going to lose energy as heat. And it shows the sun's energy going to the primary producers. So it's not that complicated. It just looks like it is. Next, we have food chain. So you should be very familiar with food chains. But every year I find that we have to go back over this because there's just more to learn than you think. So food chain models one way that energy can be transferred in an ecosystem. That's really important. One way. That is so important. So in a food chain, you're going to have arrows. The arrows show the direction that energy moves. So it doesn't show what is eating what. It shows the way the energy is moving. So when you see, well, I'll show you in a minute. I don't want to confuse you. But when you see those arrows, it's showing energy is moving from this place to the other place. So here we go. Let's look at this. So we have the maize or the corn, that's the producer. The locust is the primary consumer. Lizard is secondary consumer. And snake is tertiary, that's third level consumer. So, or you may say apex predator. They just labeled this in this food chain as tertiary consumer, which is fine. It's all pretty much the same. So this arrow is showing the energy is moving from this maize to this locust because the locust is eating the maize. So this does not, a lot of times people come to me and they think that this means the arrow, if I ask you to draw a food chain, like a bunch of people will draw it backwards because they would draw the arrow going this way towards the corn. This arrow does not show that the corn is eating the locust. The arrow is showing the energy from this corn is being given to the locust. And the only way that can happen is because the locust eats the corn. So the energy from this locust is being transferred to this lizard because the lizard eats the locust. The energy in this lizard is transferred to the snake because the snake eats the lizard. So the arrows show the direction that energy flows. That's really, really important. It doesn't show what eats what. You can figure that out from the arrows, but the way that the arrows point is they point towards where the energy is moving to. So the energy is moving from the maize to the locust because the locust eats the maize. Here's another food chain. It does not have to be in a straight line necessarily. It's just one way. So you can draw a beautiful little semicircle of a food chain if you want to. You can draw one that's zigzag, as long as the arrows are pointing in one direction. So we see that the organisms are all over the place, but the arrows pointing this way to the right, to the right, to the right, to the right, to the right. So the arrows are all pointing in the same direction. So in this one, and it even adds in the sun and the decomposers. That's just so nice. Usually you won't see the sun or decomposers in food chains. We'll talk about that a lot. So the energy from the producer goes to the grasshopper because the grasshopper eats the producer. The energy from the grasshopper goes to the frog because the frog eats the grasshopper. The energy from the frog goes to the snake because the snake eats the frog. The energy from the snake goes to the hawk because the hawk eats the snake. And then this food chain says that the energy from the hawk goes to the fungi because the fungi is breaking down the hawk. We'll talk about that later. Why I don't really like that. But anyway. And here's another food chain. And this one actually shows sort of the cycle. So you can do that in your food chain if you want to. This is why this one's better than the previous one, except it leaves out the sun. If it had the sun, it would be awesome. But, well, sort of awesome. But it does show that the decomposers will break down the owl whenever it dies. So sad. And it will send its nutrients back to the grass. But I'll just go ahead and tell you the reason that this isn't amazing is because this is implying that decomposers just break down the owl. That's not true. Like I said before, I guess in the last video, decomposers, they don't care. They don't discriminate. They'll break down anything that's in their way. So if there's a dead grasshopper, the decomposers will break that grasshopper down just as happily as they will break down the owl. So next we have food web. So food web models all ways that energy can be transferred in an ecosystem, and the arrows still show the direction that energy moves. This is so important. Very, very few people understand when they come to me what a food web really is. A food web isn't just a bunch of food chains put together. I mean, it is, but the best way to think about a food web is it shows every single possibility, every scenario that could happen in that ecosystem is displayed in a food web. So it shows not just multiple. I'll take multiple. If you tell me that a food web shows multiple ways that energy can move through an ecosystem, that's good. But the best answer would be that a food web shows you every single possibility, every single way that energy could be moved in an ecosystem. So here's as a good food web. And notice, no sun, no decomposers. That's fine. Those are just implied. So we have this corn here, and the corn gives its energy to the grasshopper. Then we get complicated. So the grasshopper can either give its energy to the rat or the frog. The way that we know what's happening is we would make a food chain out of that. We would say, okay, in this scenario, the rat ate the grasshopper. So then the energy would go to the rat. But the food web is saying the grasshopper could be eaten by either the rat or the frog. It just depends. So the rat, let's just follow this one. The rat can give its energy to or be eaten by the python, the eagle, or the wolf. Let's say the python. The python can be eaten by the eagle. The eagle is it eaten by anything? No. So that would be considered an apex predator. Because it's like at the top of the food chain. Nobody can touch it. Top of the food pyramid, I guess we should say. So the grasshopper, let's say the frog eats it. The frog can give its energy to the python or the eagle. And that's pretty much it. Oh, rat. The rat can give its energy to the wolf or the eagle. So, and then the wolf can be eaten by the eagle. So if we look down here, we have other producers. That's crazy. In a normal ecosystem, there is more than one of each kind of organism. There's more than one producer. There's more than one consumer. There's more than one decomposer. So a food web will show you every single possibility. So there could be a flowering plant or lavenders, and that can be eaten by the butterfly, frog, eagle, butterfly, dragonfly, frog, eagle, butterfly, dragonfly, frog, python, eagle. Just follow these arrows to see what can happen, what can be an outcome in this ecosystem. And the same thing here with mangoes. We've got fruit fly, we've got dragonfly, we've got thrush, we've got eagle, we've got all this good stuff. So the food web is going to show you every single scenario that could happen in that ecosystem. So here's another one. This is just the sea one. It's the same thing. We have the seaweed or the phytoplankton as our producers, and it shows you everything that can eat each of those. Let's just do seaweed real quick. Seaweed can give its energy to the crab, which can give its energy to the squid, and then either the penguin or the elephant seal can eat the squid. For the penguin, either the leopard seal or the killer whale can eat the penguin. Elephant seal, the only thing that can eat the elephant seal is the killer whale. Only thing that can eat the leopard seal is the killer whale. So the arrows show the direction that energy will move, and it shows the possibility of what can eat what organism. Here's a really complicated one. This will be something like you will see. I may give you one like this in class. We may make one. I've been known to do that. I've written one on the wall that takes up the whole wall. It gets really messy. But we'll talk about that. Don't let it stress you out because there's a bunch of lines. Hopefully, we won't see anything too complicated. as we go about. But it just looks scary. But if you just get really close and you just trace the lines, it's not too bad. We'll practice these, don't worry. So that's it for our part two notes for energy flow. We talked about energy pyramids, we talked about food chains and food webs, and how they're all sort of similar but different as well. So if you have any questions with that, just let me know, and I'll be happy to help.